The notice appeared on my door at 7 in the morning, typed in bold letters that seemed designed to ruin my day before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. I stood there in my bathrobe, reading the words 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My wood-burning stove, the beautiful EPA-certified model I'd installed just 4 months ago, was apparently illegal according to the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. I had exactly 7 days to remove it or face daily fines of $200. My name is Cameron Murphy, and I'd moved to this subdivision outside Denver, Colorado last spring thinking I'd finally found the perfect place to settle down. The mountain views were spectacular, the neighbors seemed friendly enough, and the house had everything I needed. The real estate agent had mentioned the HOA in passing, but assured me they were very reasonable and hardly ever bothered anyone. That should have been my first warning sign. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the notice. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sharp and clipped. "Meadowbrook Hills HOA, this is Brenda speaking." "Hi, yeah, I just got a notice about my wood-burning stove. There must be some mistake. Name and address." I gave her the information, hearing the clicking of keyboard keys on the other end. "No mistake, Mr. Murphy. Your wood-burning stove violates Covenant Section 12.7, which prohibits outdoor burning and smoke-producing devices that create a nuisance for neighbors." It's not an outdoor burning device. It's inside my house, and it's EPA certified, completely legal according to federal and state regulations. The HOA covenants supersede individual preferences, Mr. Murphy. We've received multiple complaints about smoke coming from your chimney. I felt my jaw tighten. Multiple complaints from who? That information is confidential. You have 7 days to comply or face fines. Have a nice day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, staring at the notice, trying to process what just happened. I'd spent $3,000 on that stove, plus another $1,500 on professional installation. The installer had specifically confirmed it met all EPA standards and local building codes. I'd even gotten the proper permits from the county. My neighbor Tom was outside watering his lawn when I walked over, still clutching the notice. Tom was in his 60s, retired from some tech company, and had been nothing but friendly since I moved in. "Morning, Cameron. You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the notice. His face fell as he read it. "Oh no, not again." "What do you mean, not again?" Tom sighed and shut off his hose. "Brenda Patterson. She's the HOA president and she's on a crusade. Started about 6 months ago. First it was gas grills on patios, then it was certain types of outdoor lighting, now apparently wood stoves. She claims everything is about maintaining property values and neighborhood aesthetics. But this is inside my house, and it's completely legal. Doesn't matter to Brenda. If she decides something is a problem, she'll find a way to make it one. She got Ted Morrison down on Elm Street to remove his workshop garage because she said the noise violated quiet enjoyment standards. Never mind that he only worked in there on Saturday afternoons. This is insane. I have all the documentation. EPA certification, county permits, everything. Tom gave me a sympathetic look. "You're going to need a lawyer. Trust me on this." Brenda doesn't back down, and she's gotten the HOA board wrapped around her finger. 3 of them are her friends from some book club, and the 5th one is her cousin. I spent the rest of the morning digging through my files, pulling out every piece of documentation related to the stove. The EPA certification was right there in black and white, confirming the model met all emission standards. The county building permit showed the installation had been inspected and approved. I had receipts, warranties, installation manuals, everything. Monday morning, I called a lawyer. The receptionist connected me to Marcus Chen, who specialized in HOA disputes. "Tell me everything," he said after I'd explained the basic situation. I went through it all, detail by detail. The installation, the certifications, the notice, my conversation with Brenda. "Okay, here's the situation," Marcus said when I finished. "HOAs have broad authority to enforce their covenants, but that authority isn't unlimited. They can't prohibit something that's explicitly protected by state or federal law. Colorado has specific statutes protecting the use of EPA-certified wood-burning appliances. The problem is, HOAs know most people won't fight back because legal fees add up fast. So what do I do? First, I'm going to draft a response to the HOA citing the relevant statutes and your EPA certification. We'll give them a chance to back down. If they don't, we file an injunction to stop the fines and potentially sue for harassment. Do you have HOA insurance? No, I didn't even know that was a thing. Most people don't. It's okay, we'll work it out. My initial consultation is free, but if this goes further, we're looking at a retainer of $2,500 to start. I closed my eyes. More money down the drain. Do it. Send the letter. I'll have it ready by tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction, every conversation, every piece of mail. Take photos of your stove, your chimney, everything. If any neighbors complain directly to you, record the conversation if Colorado's a one-party consent state, which it is. Tuesday afternoon, Marcus emailed me a copy of the letter he'd sent to the HOA. It was 4 pages of legal terminology that basically boiled down to, "Back off, or we'll see you in court." He cited Colorado Revised Statutes Section 3833.3, 106.7, which explicitly stated that HOAs couldn't prohibit EPA-certified wood-burning devices. He included copies of my certification, my permits, and a strongly worded warning about potential liability for harassment and violations of state law. I felt a small surge of hope. Maybe this would end quickly. Wednesday morning, I got another notice on my door. This one was even more aggressive. The HOA was now claiming my chimney violated architectural standards because it extended above the roofline by more than the aesthetically acceptable limit, and that the visible smoke constituted a visual nuisance under a different section of the covenants. The fine had increased to $300 per day. Starting immediately, I called Marcus, practically shouting into the phone. "They're doubling down. They know they're wrong about the stove, so now they're making up other violations. Send me photos of your chimney and a copy of the original architectural plans that were approved when your house was built. I'll check the county records too. This is retaliation, and it's going to backfire on them." I spent Wednesday afternoon on a ladder, taking photos of my chimney from every angle. My house was a standard model in the subdivision, identical to about 30 other houses. I drove around and counted at least 15 other chimneys that extended the same height or higher than mine. I photographed all of them. Thursday, Marcus filed a motion for a temporary restraining order in Jefferson County District Court. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, the HOA continued threatening daily fines. Friday evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a woman in her mid-50s standing there, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression suggesting she'd just smelled something unpleasant. "Cameron Murphy, that's me. I'm Brenda Patterson, HOA president. I think we need to have a conversation." I almost shut the door in her face, but curiosity got the better of me. "Come in." She walked into my living room, her eyes immediately landing on the wood stove in the corner. It was a beautiful piece, cast iron with a glass door, currently dark and unused since the weather had warmed up. "That's the problem," she said, pointing at it like it was a dead animal. "That's an EPA-certified, legally installed, county-approved heating appliance. It's a nuisance. Do you know how many complaints I've received?" "You keep saying that, but you won't tell me who's complaining or show me any evidence of actual harm." Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Desmond, 3 doors down, has asthma. Your smoke aggravates her condition. Mrs. Desmond is welcome to provide medical documentation of that claim. And if my EPA-certified stove is bothering her, then every other wood-burning appliance in the neighborhood must be too. Are you going to fine all of them? The others have fireplaces. Those are architecturally integrated. Your stove is an addition that was permitted and inspected." "You're grasping at straws, Brenda." Her face reddened. "I'm trying to maintain the quality of life in this neighborhood. People moved here because of certain standards and expectations. People moved here to live in their homes. What I do inside my house, as long as it's legal, is none of your business. Everything in this subdivision is HOA business. That's what you agreed to when you bought here. I agreed to reasonable covenants, not arbitrary enforcement of made-up rules. My lawyer has already filed a restraining order. I'll see you in court on Tuesday." Brenda stood up, her posture rigid. "You're making a mistake. The HOA has significant resources and we protect our authority vigorously. So do I, and I have the law on my side." She left without another word, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the frame. Saturday morning, I found my mailbox had been spray painted with bright orange paint. Sunday, someone left a bag of dog waste on my porch. Monday, I discovered all 4 of my tires had been slashed. I called the police and filed a report. The officer who responded was sympathetic but realistic. "Unless you have camera footage or witnesses, there's not much we can do. Could be random vandalism." "It's not random. I'm in a dispute with my HOA." The officer raised his eyebrows. "HOA disputes can get ugly. I'd suggest installing security cameras if you haven't already." I spent Monday afternoon at Home Depot, buying a complete security camera system. By evening, I had 4 cameras covering every angle of my property, all feeding to cloud storage. Tuesday morning arrived with a mix of nervousness and determination. I met Marcus at the courthouse at 8:30. The hearing was scheduled for 9. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked as we walked through security. "Like I'm about to fight a war over something that should have been a non-issue." That's HOA disputes in a nutshell. But we've got a solid case. Colorado law is very clear on this. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with harsh fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable wooden benches. Brenda was already there with the HOA's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd never lost a case in her life. Judge Patricia Holland entered at exactly 9, and we all stood. She was an older woman with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every possible excuse and wasn't impressed by any of them. "This is a motion for temporary restraining order in the matter of Murphy versus Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. Counsel, keep it brief." "Mr. Chen, you filed the motion, you go first." Marcus stood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of HOA overreach. My client installed an EPA-certified wood-burning stove in his home, following all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. The HOA is attempting to fine him for this legal installation, citing vague covenant provisions about nuisances and aesthetics. Colorado law specifically protects the use of EPA-certified wood-burning appliances under CRS 3833.3 106.7. The HOA's actions violate state law and constitute harassment. The HOA's lawyer, who introduced herself as Patricia Vance, stood next. Your Honor, the HOA isn't disputing the EPA certification. What we're addressing is the practical impact on neighboring residents. We have documented complaints from multiple homeowners about smoke, odor, and health concerns. The covenants give the HOA broad authority to address nuisances that affect quality of life. This isn't about banning wood-burning stoves categorically. It's about this specific installation creating problems for this specific neighborhood. Judge Holland looked at the papers in front of her. Miss Vance, do you have these documented complaints? Medical records, photographs, anything concrete? We have email complaints and phone records, Your Honor. Let me see them. There was a long pause while Patricia Vance shuffled through her papers. She handed a thin folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Holland spent about 2 minutes reviewing the contents, her expression growing increasingly skeptical. Miss Vance, this is 3 emails, all from the same person, and they're extremely vague. One says there's smoke from the Murphy house sometimes. Another says I'm concerned about air quality. The third is a complaint about the smell of burning wood. There are no medical records, no air quality tests, no photographs, nothing substantive. Is this really all the HOA has? Your Honor, we take all resident complaints seriously, and when we receive multiple complaints about the same issue, 3 emails from one person over 4 months isn't multiple complaints, Counselor. It's one person complaining 3 times. Judge Holland turned to Marcus. Do you have the EPA certification and county permits? Yes, Your Honor, complete documentation. Marcus handed over a thick folder. The judge reviewed it methodically. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of papers. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. This is about as clear-cut as these cases get. Mr. Murphy has an EPA-certified wood-burning stove, professionally installed with proper permits and inspections. Colorado law explicitly protects the use of such devices. The HOA has provided no credible evidence of actual harm or legitimate nuisance. The covenants cannot override state law. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. The HOA is prohibited from fining Mr. Murphy or taking any enforcement action related to his wood-burning stove. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to cease and desist from any further harassment on this matter. We'll schedule a follow-up hearing in 30 days to make this permanent if necessary. I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. Marcus gave me a subtle nod. Brenda, sitting behind her lawyer, looked like she'd been slapped. Your Honor, Patricia Vance said quickly, we'd like to appeal. You can appeal anything you want, Counselor, but this order is effective immediately. If your client violates it, we'll be having a very different conversation about contempt. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Next case. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand. That went as well as we could have hoped. Judge Holland saw right through their nonsense. The HOA will probably back off now. Most of them do once a judge rules against them. And if they don't, then we make the restraining order permanent and potentially sue for attorney's fees and damages. But I think this is over. Brenda just got publicly slapped down by a judge. She's not going to want to risk contempt charges. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut said this wasn't finished. I was right. Wednesday morning, I received a notice that the HOA was calling a special meeting to amend the covenants. The proposed amendment would explicitly ban wood-burning stoves installed after a certain date, which conveniently was 1 month before I'd moved in. The meeting was scheduled for Friday evening, and all homeowners were encouraged to attend. I called Marcus immediately. Can they do that? Technically, Yes, HOAs can amend their covenants if they follow proper procedure and get sufficient homeowner votes. However, Colorado law still applies. Even if they pass an amendment banning wood stoves, they can't enforce it against EPA-certified devices. The state statute supersedes HOA covenants. So this is all theater, pretty much. But you should go to the meeting. Speak up, explain your position. Other homeowners might support you once they understand what's really happening. Friday evening, the community center was packed. I arrived 15 minutes early and still barely found a seat. At least 70 or 80 people filled the room, which was probably close to half the subdivision's residents. Brenda stood at the front with the other board members: Karen Hendricks, Susan Moore, Patricia Crane, and Doug Patterson, who I'd learned was Brenda's husband. That seemed like a conflict of interest, but apparently it was allowed under the current bylaws. Brenda called the meeting to order at exactly 7. Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight to discuss a proposed amendment to our covenants addressing wood-burning appliances. As many of you know, we've had issues with smoke and air quality complaints. The board has drafted an amendment that would prohibit the installation of wood-burning stoves and limit the use of existing fireplaces to certain hours and conditions. A man near the front raised his hand. I have a fireplace. Are you saying I can't use it whenever I want? We're proposing reasonable restrictions, Brenda said smoothly. No burning during summer months, no burning during poor air quality days, things like that. That's ridiculous, someone else called out. I heat my house with my fireplace. Brenda's expression tightened. The amendment is designed to balance individual preferences with community health and welfare. I stood up. Can I say something? All eyes turned to me. Brenda's face showed clear recognition and not the friendly kind. This amendment isn't about community health. It's about the HOA president targeting me because I wouldn't comply with an illegal demand. I have an EPA-certified wood-burning stove, professionally installed with all proper permits. A judge just issued a restraining order against the HOA because their attempt to fine me violated state law. Now they're trying to change the rules retroactively to target me specifically. The room erupted in murmurs. Several people turned to look at Brenda, who'd gone slightly pale. That's a mischaracterization, she said sharply. We've received numerous complaints about smoke and air quality. Show us the complaints, I interrupted. In court, you produced 3 emails from one person. If this is such a widespread problem, where's the evidence? Tom, my neighbor, stood up. I've lived here 8 years. I've never noticed smoke being a problem. This seems like a solution looking for a problem. A woman in the back raised her hand. I'm Zara Daniels. I live on Maple Court, I have asthma, and I've never had issues with anyone's fireplace or stove. Is this really necessary? Wait, that was supposed to be the person Brenda claimed was being harmed by my stove. I'd gotten the name wrong earlier. She'd said Mrs. Desmond, but apparently that wasn't accurate, or she'd been lying. Another man stood. I'm considering installing a wood stove myself for backup heat. Are you telling me I can't do that? The amendment would prohibit new installations, yes, Patricia Crane said from the board table. Even if they're legal under state law, the man pressed. The covenants govern what's allowed in the subdivision, Brenda said. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and reading from the statute Marcus had sent me. Colorado Revised Statutes Section 3833.3 106.7 says, and I quote, "An association shall not prohibit the use of any wood-burning appliance that has been certified by the EPA or an equivalent certifying agency." That's state law. It overrides HOA covenants. The murmurs grew louder. Several people pulled out their own phones, presumably looking up the statute. This is about property values, Brenda said, her voice rising. Smoke and burning smell reduce the appeal of the neighborhood. No, I cut her off. This is about you wanting control over every aspect of everyone's lives. I followed every law, got every permit, did everything right. And you still tried to fine me hundreds of dollars a day because you personally don't like wood stoves. That's not leadership, that's tyranny. Someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, at least half the room was applauding. Brenda's face had gone from pale to bright red. This meeting is about the amendment, not about personal attacks. We need to vote on whether to move forward with the drafting process. Doug Patterson spoke up for the first time. All in favor of proceeding with the amendment, say aye. 4 board members said aye. Only 4, because Doug had abstained after seeing the room's mood. All opposed. Nothing, because regular homeowners didn't get to vote at this stage. That would come later if the amendment was formally proposed. The motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention, Brenda announced. We'll draft the formal amendment and schedule a vote at next month's general meeting. This is a waste of time, someone shouted. You can't override state law. Brenda ignored that and quickly moved to adjourn the meeting. People clustered in small groups, talking animatedly. Several came up to me to shake my hand or express support. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. You made an enemy tonight, but you also made a lot of friends. Most people are sick of Brenda's power trips. I just want to use my stove in peace. You might have started something bigger than that. There's been talk about recalling the board for a while now. This might be the catalyst. Over the next week, I learned Tom was right. Someone created a Facebook group called Meadowbrook Hills HOA Accountability that quickly gained over 100 members. People shared stories of Brenda's overreach, fines for lawn decorations, complaints about children's toys left in yards, threats over paint colors that were supposedly not on the approved list, but actually were. A petition started circulating to hold a special election to recall the entire HOA board. Colorado law required 20% of homeowners to sign the petition. Within 10 days, they had 30%. Brenda responded by sending out a mass email claiming that outside agitators were trying to destroy the neighborhood's carefully maintained standards. She warned that property values would plummet if the board was recalled, and chaos was allowed to reign. The email backfired spectacularly. Even people who had been neutral now thought she sounded unhinged. The recall election was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I continued documenting everything. My security cameras caught someone trying to stuff something in my mailbox at 2 in the morning. The footage was grainy but showed a woman about Brenda's height and build. I filed another police report. The next HOA board meeting was 3 weeks after the special meeting. This one was even more packed than the last. The fire marshal actually showed up to do a head count and make sure we weren't over capacity. The meeting started with standard business, reports on landscaping contracts and budget items. Then they got to the proposed covenant amendment. Patricia Crane read the draft language. It was even more restrictive than I'd expected, banning not just wood-burning stoves, but also limiting fireplace use to October through March, prohibiting burning on days when the air quality index was above 50, and requiring homeowners to notify neighbors 24 hours before burning anything. "This is insane," someone shouted before Brenda could even call for questions. "Order," Brenda snapped. "We'll take comments in turn." What followed was 90 minutes of heated debate. A few people supported the restrictions, mostly Brenda's friends from the book club. Everyone else ranged from skeptical to outright hostile. An older man named Frank stood up. "I'm a retired environmental engineer. I worked for the EPA for 30 years. These restrictions aren't based on any scientific understanding of air quality or emissions. EPA-certified devices are called that because they meet strict clean air standards. What you're proposing is security theater that will accomplish nothing except annoying homeowners. A woman named Jennifer added, "I'm a real estate agent. I can tell you right now, this kind of restrictive covenant actually hurts property values. Buyers want freedom and flexibility, not neighborhoods run like prison camps." Brenda was visibly struggling to maintain control. "We have a responsibility to all residents, not just those who want to burn wood." "Where's the science?" Frank interrupted. "Show us air quality data proving there's a problem." "We don't need to prove a problem to take preventative action." "Actually, you do," Marcus said from the back of the room. I hadn't known he was there. "If the HOA implements restrictions that reduce property values or limit legal activities without demonstrating actual need, homeowners can sue for damages." Brenda glared at him. "And who are you?" "Marcus Chen, attorney representing Cameron Murphy. But I'm also a homeowner here. I bought in this subdivision last month, so I have standing to speak." That was news to me. I turned around and Marcus gave me a small wave. "The vote on the amendment will proceed as scheduled," Brenda said, clearly trying to regain control. "When is that?" someone asked. 4 weeks from tonight at the next regular meeting." "And what's required to pass?" 2/3 of voting homeowners. The room erupted in conversation. 2/3 was a high bar, and based on the sentiment in the room, it seemed unlikely. Over the next month, the campaign for and against intensified. Brenda and her supporters put flyers on every door warning about health risks and declining property values. The opposition group distributed information about Colorado law, EPA standards, and examples of HOA overreach. I continued using my wood stove normally, which wasn't very often since spring had fully arrived. But on a few chilly evenings, I lit a fire, and my cameras caught someone taking photographs of my chimney from the street. The final vote took place on a Wednesday evening in mid-May. The community center couldn't hold everyone, so they moved the meeting to the elementary school cafeteria. Over 200 people showed up, which was nearly every household in the subdivision. Brenda called the meeting to order and immediately moved to the vote. No discussion, no debate, just straight to counting ballots. All homeowners in good standing are eligible to vote. You must present your ID and proof of residence. 1 vote per household, regardless of how many names are on the deed. The voting took over an hour as people lined up to fill out and submit paper ballots. I voted no, obviously. So did Tom. So did what looked like the vast majority of people I could observe. While the board members counted votes in a separate room, the rest of us waited in an atmosphere that felt more like election night than an HOA meeting. After 45 minutes, Brenda returned to the front table. Her expression was stone, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "The results of the covenant amendment vote are as follows. Total eligible voters, 212 households. Total votes cast, 206. Votes required for passage, 138. Votes in favor, 43. Votes against, 163. The amendment fails." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Brenda stood rigid at the front, clearly furious but maintaining composure. "The next item of business," she started, but someone interrupted. "Point of order. We need to address the recall petition." Brenda's jaw clenched. "That's not on tonight's agenda." "It doesn't need to be," Marcus called out. "The petition has sufficient signatures to trigger a special election under Colorado law and the HOA's own bylaws. The board is required to schedule it within 30 days of petition certification." The petition hasn't been certified. I certified it yesterday, Doug Patterson said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I'm the HOA secretary. It's my job to verify signatures. The petition is valid and has been properly submitted. We need to schedule the recall election. Brenda turned to stare at her husband, betrayal written across her face. Doug, what are you doing? My job. That's all. This has gotten out of hand, Brenda. We should have backed down weeks ago. The room went silent, everyone watching this very personal drama unfold. You've undermined me at every turn, Brenda hissed. I've tried to talk sense into you, Doug shot back. You turned a simple dispute into a war and now it's blowing up the entire board. I'm trying to salvage something here. Brenda grabbed her papers and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the silent cafeteria. After a moment, Karen Hendricks and Susan Moore followed her. Patricia Crane and Doug Patterson remained at the table. Well, Patricia said into the awkward silence, I guess we need to schedule that recall election. According to the bylaws, it must be held within 30 days and requires a quorum of 50% of homeowners to be valid. How does 3 weeks from tonight sound? People nodded and murmured agreement. The meeting broke up shortly after. On my way out, Marcus caught up with me. That was dramatic. You bought a house here just to help my case, I asked. I bought a house here because it's a nice area and I was looking anyway. Helping your case was a bonus. Plus, I'd heard stories about this HOA and wanted to see it firsthand. Turns out the stories were all true. Think Brenda will actually get recalled after tonight? Definitely. The question is whether she goes quietly or makes it even messier. She made it messier. 2 days later, the HOA filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming I had defamed Brenda and damaged her reputation through false statements and malicious accusations. The suit demanded $50,000 in damages. Marcus laughed when I showed him the filing. This is a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to intimidate you into silence through expensive litigation. Colorado has anti-slap statutes. We can get this dismissed quickly and possibly get attorney fees awarded. How quickly is quickly? A few months. Unfortunately, the legal system isn't as fast as we'd like. The recall election was held on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after the amendment vote. Turnout was massive. Over 80% of households. The results weren't even close. All 5 board members were recalled, with Brenda receiving the most votes for removal at 92%. A temporary board was appointed to serve until regular elections could be held in 3 months. The temporary board's first action was to formally withdraw all fines and enforcement actions against me and issue a written apology. Their second action was to drop the defamation lawsuit. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. 1 week after the recall, I woke up at 3 in the morning to the smell of smoke. Not the pleasant wood smoke from my stove, but the acrid chemical smell of something burning that shouldn't be. I ran downstairs and found smoke seeping under my front door. I opened it carefully and saw flames engulfing my mailbox and spreading to the wooden post that held it up. I grabbed my fire extinguisher and emptied it on the flames, then called 911. The fire department arrived within 10 minutes, but by then the fire was out. They sprayed down the area anyway and checked for hot spots. Looks like accelerant was used, the fire captain said, examining the remains. Gasoline, probably. You should call the police. The police arrived shortly after. 2 officers took photos and gathered evidence while I explained about the HOA dispute and previous vandalism. We'll check your security footage, Officer Martinez said. If someone intentionally set this fire, that's arson. That's serious. We reviewed the footage together. At 2:47 a.m., A figure approached my mailbox carrying what looked like a gas can. The person poured liquid on and around the mailbox, then lit it with what might have been a lighter or matches. The figure was wearing dark clothes and a hood, but there was one clear frame where the hood slipped back slightly. "Can you zoom in on that?" Officer Martinez asked. The security system let me zoom and enhance. The face was grainy but recognizable. It was Brenda Patterson. "That's the former HOA president," I said, pointing at the screen. Officer Martinez and his partner exchanged glances. "You're sure?" "Absolutely. And you can probably confirm it from her gait and body type if you look at the other footage." They watched the video several more times, taking notes. "We'll need to take this footage as evidence. Can you send it to this email address?" I sent it immediately. "We're going to have a conversation with Miss Patterson. Arson is a class 4 felony in Colorado. If she did this, she's looking at serious prison time." The sun was coming up by the time the police and fire department left. I was exhausted but too wired to sleep. I called Marcus and left a voicemail explaining what had happened. He called back at 7:30. "She committed arson." "Is she out of her mind?" "Apparently, yes." "Okay, this changes everything. The HOA dispute is now a criminal matter. Save all communications, all documents, everything. The district attorney is going to want a complete timeline of the harassment." 2 days later, Brenda was arrested at her home and charged with arson, criminal mischief, and harassment. The local news covered it, with headlines like "Former HOA President Arrested for Arson" and "HOA Dispute Turns Criminal." The story gained traction on social media, with people sharing their own HOA horror stories. A reporter from a Denver news station called and asked if I'd be willing to do an interview. I agreed. The interview aired that evening. I explained the whole situation, from the initial violation notice through the court order, the recall election, and finally the arson. The reporter had also interviewed other homeowners, the fire captain, and even Marcus about HOA overreach and legal protections. The story went semi-viral, at least within Colorado. The state legislature had been considering reforms to HOA law, and my case became a rallying point for advocates pushing for stronger homeowner protections. Brenda's trial was scheduled for 4 months out. In the meantime, she was released on bail with conditions including staying away from me and my property. The new HOA board, elected in regular elections 2 months after the recall, was a completely different group. They were focused on basic maintenance and services, rather than micromanaging everyone's lives. One of their first actions was to formally adopt a policy stating they would not enforce restrictions that conflicted with state or federal law. Marcus helped me file a civil suit against Brenda personally for damages, harassment, and emotional distress. That case would run parallel to the criminal proceedings. As summer arrived, I finally got to just enjoy my house. I didn't use the wood stove much in the warm months, obviously, but knowing I could use it freely when fall came was a relief. Tom and I had become good friends through the whole ordeal. We'd sometimes sit on my back deck in the evenings, drinking beer and watching the sunset over the mountains. "You know you're a neighborhood legend now," he said one evening, "for getting my mailbox burned down, for standing up to Brenda when no one else would. You started something that needed to happen. This HOA needed a reset, and you forced it. I just wanted to heat my house." Sometimes that's how revolutions start. The criminal trial began in September. I was the primary witness for the prosecution. The video evidence was compelling, and Brenda's lawyer knew it. They tried to argue that she'd been under extreme stress and not in her right mind, but that defense fell apart when the prosecutor showed the pattern of escalating behavior over months. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge acknowledged that Brenda had no prior criminal record, but noted the premeditated nature of the arson and the ongoing pattern of harassment. Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust and authority in your community. Rather than using that position responsibly, you abused it. When you didn't get your way through official channels, you turned to vandalism and ultimately arson, putting lives at risk. This court takes such conduct very seriously. She sentenced Brenda to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered restitution for my damages and court costs. In the courtroom, I watched Brenda's face crumple as the bailiffs led her away. Part of me felt bad for her. Part of me thought she'd brought this entirely on herself. The civil case settled a month later. Brenda's homeowner's insurance didn't cover criminal acts, but her personal assets did. I received a settlement of $75,000, which more than covered my legal fees, the security system, new tires, a new mailbox, and all the stress and time lost. As winter approached and I finally got to use my wood-burning stove freely, the whole ordeal felt like it had happened to someone else. The new HOA board was functional and reasonable. The neighborhood had settled into a more relaxed atmosphere. People actually seemed friendlier, as if the recall had released some collective tension. I was loading wood into my stove one cold November evening when my phone rang. It was a producer from a national morning show, asking if I'd be willing to discuss HOA reform on air. "Thanks, but I think I've had enough attention," I said. "I just want to live my life quietly. We understand, but your case has really struck a chord with people. State legislatures across the country are looking at HOA reform because of stories like yours." "That's great, but I'm not interested in being a spokesperson. There are plenty of lawyers and advocates who can speak more knowledgeably than me." I hung up and went back to my fire. The stove was putting out good heat now, the flames dancing behind the glass door. It was everything I'd wanted when I installed it, a reliable, efficient, legal way to heat my home. Marcus stopped by that weekend with a bottle of bourbon to celebrate the settlement. "You know," he said as we sat by the fire, "you could write a book about this, how I fought my HOA and won." "No thanks. I've done enough documentation to last a lifetime." "Fair enough. What's next for you, staying in the house?" "Yeah, actually, it's a good house, good location, and now the HOA is tolerable. Plus I'll be damned if I let Brenda run me out of my own home." "Good man." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. "Can I ask you something?" I said eventually. "Sure." "Did you really buy a house here just because it was convenient, or was it specifically to help my case?" Marcus grinned. "Honestly, bit of both. I'd been looking for a place closer to my office. When you called about the HOA issue, I looked up the subdivision and realized it was in an area I'd been considering. Buying here meant I could be directly involved rather than just advising from the outside. Plus the houses are nice and the price was right. So you're stuck with us now. Could be worse. At least the HOA won't bother me about my rain barrel." "You have a rain barrel, getting one next spring." "They tried to ban them 5 years ago, but it's protected under Colorado water conservation law." "Want to guess who led that fight?" "Brenda." Bingo. She really had issues with people making their own decisions. The holidays came and went. The neighborhood looked beautiful with Christmas lights, which the old board had regulated heavily, but the new board didn't care about as long as they weren't offensive or dangerous. In February, I got an email from the district attorney's office informing me that Brenda had been released on parole after serving 8 months for good behavior. The terms of her parole included continued restrictions on contact with me and participation in anger management counseling. I didn't expect to hear from her, and I didn't. According to Tom, who still kept his ear to the ground for neighborhood gossip, Brenda and Doug had quietly listed their house and moved to another state shortly after her release. Spring arrived again, marking a full year since the whole ordeal began. The subdivision held its annual spring cleanup day, and I volunteered along with probably 50 other residents. It was the kind of normal community activity that should have always been the focus, rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. As I worked alongside neighbors pulling weeds from common areas and touching up paint on the community center, I realized the whole experience had taught me something important about HOAs and community living in general. The structure of an HOA isn't inherently bad, it's just a tool. In the hands of reasonable people focused on legitimate community needs, it can be beneficial. In the hands of petty tyrants, it becomes oppressive. The key was accountability. Homeowners needed to stay engaged and willing to push back against overreach. The recall mechanism existed for a reason, but it only worked if people were willing to use it. Tom wandered over during a water break. Heard you turned down another interview request. News travels fast. Small neighborhood. You're still getting requests. Every few weeks. Some podcast or blog or YouTube channel wants to talk about HOA horror stories. I keep saying no. Why? You could probably make some money off it. Because I don't want to be known as the HOA guy for the rest of my life. I fought for my right to use my wood stove. I won. That's the end of the story. Is it though? I mean, the Colorado legislature passed new HOA regulations partly because of your case. That's a bigger legacy than just one wood stove. Which is great, but I don't need credit for it. The activists and lawyers who'd been pushing for reform for years deserve the credit. My situation just provided a timely example. As summer returned, I settled into what felt like the normal life I'd been seeking when I bought the house. Work during the day, relaxation in the evening, weekend projects around the house. The wood stove sat unused through the warm months, but I knew it would be there when I needed it come fall. The new HOA board was so low-key that I sometimes forgot we even had one. They handled the basics, maintaining common areas, managing the landscaping contracts, organizing neighborhood events, and left everyone else alone. It was exactly what an HOA should be. In August, Marcus called with news. Remember that anti-slap motion we filed before Brenda dropped the defamation suit? Vaguely. What about it? The judge awarded attorney fees even though the case was dismissed. You're getting another $23,000. Seriously? Yep. Colorado law allows fee recovery in slap suits even if the plaintiff withdraws before the motion is heard, if the court finds the suit was frivolous and intended to harass. Judge Holland really didn't like what Brenda pulled. The check arrived 3 weeks later. Between the civil settlement and the fee recovery, I'd actually come out financially ahead despite all the stress and legal expenses. It felt strange to have profited from being harassed, but I wasn't going to refuse the money. I used part of it to take a long, overdue vacation to Alaska, spent 2 weeks hiking and fishing and not thinking about HOAs at all. When I returned in September, the neighborhood was preparing for fall. Leaves were starting to turn in the mountains, and the air had that crisp edge that made me think about lighting up the wood stove soon. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for late September. Unlike the previous year's meetings, this one was sparsely attended. Maybe 30 people showed up, and the agenda was purely functional. Budget review, election of officers, updates on maintenance projects. No drama, No controversial proposals, nothing interesting. It was beautiful. As October arrived and the weather turned genuinely cold, I finally lit my first fire of the season. The stove worked perfectly, warming my living room and providing the cozy ambience I'd wanted all along. I took a photo and almost posted it to social media, then decided against it. The fewer people who associated me with HOA drama, the better. Tom came over that evening to see the stove in action. "Worth all the trouble?" he asked. "You know what? Yeah, not because of the stove itself, though I do love it, but because I stood up for something that mattered. Property rights, the rule of law, protection from arbitrary authority. Those things are important." Heavy thoughts for a Friday night. True, want a beer? Absolutely. We sat by the fire, talking about nothing in particular. Sports, work, his upcoming trip to visit his grandkids. Normal life, the kind that should have been normal all along. As winter set in properly, I used the wood stove regularly. It heated the house efficiently and cut my gas bill significantly. More importantly, every time I lit it, I felt a small sense of victory. Not over Brenda specifically, though that was part of it. Victory over the idea that arbitrary rules should override common sense and legal rights. The neighborhood seemed healthier too. More people were outside, more willing to chat and interact. The oppressive atmosphere of hyper-vigilant rule enforcement had lifted, replaced by something more neighborly and relaxed. In December, I ran into Doug Patterson at the grocery store. It was awkward at first, neither of us quite knowing what to say. "Cameron," he said finally, "I owe you an apology. I should have stood up to Brenda much earlier. I knew she was going too far, but I avoided conflict at home by enabling her behavior. I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of that. I appreciate you saying that. For what it's worth, you did the right thing in the end, certifying that recall petition. Too little, too late, but thank you. How is Brenda doing? Honestly, I don't know. We separated shortly after she got out. The counseling helped her see how destructive her need for control had become, but it also made clear that we had deeper issues. She moved to Arizona to be near her sister. I stayed here because I like the area and I'm not going to let our problems drive me away from a place I've lived for 15 years. That's fair. I hope things work out for both of you. Same to you. And Cameron, thank you for standing your ground. This neighborhood needed someone to draw a line. The holidays came and went. New Year's arrived with heavy snow and temperatures well below freezing. My wood stove kept the house warm and comfortable while my neighbors who relied solely on gas heat complained about their utility bills. In January, I got an unexpected letter from the state HOA office, which had been newly created under the reform legislation. They wanted to feature my case in an educational brochure about homeowner rights and HOA limitations. I agreed on the condition that they focus on the legal principles rather than the personal drama. A month later, they sent me a draft of the brochure. It explained Colorado law regarding EPA-certified devices, the process for challenging HOA decisions, and resources available to homeowners in disputes. My case was mentioned briefly as an example, but not in a sensational way. It felt like a fitting end to the whole situation. My experience would help educate other homeowners about their rights, which might prevent future Brendas from abusing their authority. February brought more snow and more opportunities to use the wood stove. I'd become quite good at managing the fire for optimal heat and efficiency. There was something satisfying about the process, the careful arrangement of logs, the control of airflow, the monitoring of temperature. One evening, as I sat reading by the fire, I realized I'd reached a state of contentment I hadn't felt in years. Good house, good neighborhood, good community. All the things I'd been looking for when I moved here. The wood stove dispute had threatened all of that, but ultimately had made it stronger. The neighborhood had purged its toxic leadership and established healthier norms. I'd learned to stand up for myself and navigate complex legal situations. The community as a whole had learned the importance of accountability and engagement. March arrived with the promise of spring. I knew I'd only use the wood stove a few more times before warm weather made it unnecessary. But knowing it would be there next winter, ready to use without harassment or interference, gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. The HOA sent out its quarterly newsletter, a simple 2-page document covering upcoming maintenance projects and reminding people about annual dues. No warnings about violations, no threats of fines, no paranoid enforcement priorities. Just basic information delivered in a respectful tone. It was everything an HOA should be and nothing more. As I write this in late March, sitting by one of the last fires of the season, I can look back on the whole experience with something approaching gratitude. Not gratitude for the harassment and stress, obviously, but gratitude for the lessons learned and the positive changes that resulted. My EPA-certified wood-burning stove is legal, functional, and exactly what I wanted. The HOA respects my right to use it. The neighborhood is healthier and more functional. The state has better protections for homeowners. And I've learned that standing up for your rights, even when it's difficult and expensive, is worth it. The fire is dying down now, the logs reduced to glowing embers. Soon I'll bank it for the night and head to bed. Tomorrow will be another normal day in my neighborhood, which is exactly how it should be. No more HOA drama. No more legal battles. No more arson attempts. Just a man, his house, and his legal wood-burning stove living in peace at last.